But the beautiful truth in this passage that Jesus conveyed to us in the New Testament in the 18th chapter of Matthew's Gospel is this pictures the fact that if a baby dies and a child dies as a result of the death of Jesus on the cross, their sinful, inherited sinful nature is taken care of by the cross. And if they die and go to heaven. They are not judged for their sins. Even babies and children who have not reached the age of accountability are sinful by nature. The first thing, I hope I get this over today, because here in this 27th chapter, this is the truth. The first thing any human being needs to do to have God in their lives is to come to the altar, to come to the cross of Christ, to rely on the sacrifice of Jesus on the cross. You can go to Sunday school and church and you can do everything, but if you do not have Jesus, do not receive and accept and rely upon His sacrificial atoning death, you cannot have fellowship with God and you cannot go to heaven. The first thing any human being needs to do to have God in their lives is to come to the altar. That's the first thing Jews had to do, as long as there was an altar. Jesus made it clear that even babies and children are saved by His death on the cross. In Matthew 18:10 and 11, Jesus said, "Beware that you don't look down upon a single one of these little children. For I tell you that in heaven their angels have constant access to my Father. And I, the Messiah, came to save the lost." Yes, they're lost, apart from the death of Jesus on the cross. He continued in verse 14, "It is not my Father's will that even one of these little ones should perish." It's not God's will. It's not God's will for any child or baby who has not reached the age of accountability to go to hell. And He provided for them through the death of Jesus on the cross. Children not old enough to believe in Jesus are saved by Jesus' death on the cross. The primary important truth of this passage in Exodus is teaching is that step one in coming to know God is the altar of sacrifice. The first thing anyone needs to do is to confess his or her sinfulness and separation from God and from His power because of sin. We must then come to the altar. The altar represents the cross on which Jesus Christ died. Even as the animal brought for sacrifice was believed to represent the person who brought the animal and was a substitute for them. Even so, Jesus Christ took our place. He was a substitute for us. Even as the animal offered was tied to the altar, so Jesus gave up control over His life and over His will. He said, "No one can kill me without my consent. I laid down my life voluntarily." John 10:18. To become God's child, to have fellowship with God, to go to heaven, we must allow the cross where Christ died to have God, we must allow our old sinful nature, the sinful person we are when we are born, we must allow it to be burned up. We must repent. We must come to the cross where Christ died in order to have God's power to overcome sin.